All right, hello and welcome to Ronnie's Health Corner. Today we're going to talk about food and nutrition. Now, before we get into it, I do want to remind you I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not certified in any of this stuff. I'm just going to be sharing with you things that have worked for me and hopefully they'll work for you. Food is one of those fundamental things. It's the foundation of all of our health. Now, make sure that if you're making any drastic changes, especially if you have some serious health issues, make sure that you consult with your physician, your family doctor, or your a medical professional before you make any changes, okay? When talking about food, for me, the fundamental thing is reflecting on your relationship with food. Food is where it all starts, right? Your relationship with food and how you interact with food will determine your level of health, good or bad, right? Good or bad. And so it's really important to look at that if you're wanting to make some health changes. For me, growing up, I used to always hear, well, okay, so I'm Filipino. I'm Filipino heritage. Grew up in a Filipino household, and so that meant we eat like Filipinos, right? Very traditional Filipino diet and nutrition, and that's also one of the things when it comes to looking at your relationship with food, right? A lot of it can be very deeply rooted in cultural background, cultural history, family history. So my Filipino, your typical Filipino diet, which meant a lot of rice, right? Rice with everything, rice every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, rice with your snack, rice, rice, rice. Everything was with rice. And so I used to hear growing up all the time, how are you going to get full if you don't eat rice? Right? That was kind of a predominant mindset around food and nutrition, like a belief system is you can't get full if you don't eat rice. And so the underlying belief system is that you eat to get full. I think it's kind of that mental process. If you trace it, you eat to get full, and if you're full, that means you've had enough food. If you've had enough food, that means you're getting the nutrition that you need, right? And there's no like deeper thought beyond that. Ultimately, we can trace a lot of our family history of illness and disease to how we ate. There's no getting around that, right? Rice is the easy culprit, obviously, to point out, but it's everything else in the Filipino cuisine, Filipino diet, traditional Filipino diet. As good as it is, it's not necessarily the healthiest for you if it's in like consistent long term. I mean, my family is proof of that. We have a long family history of illness and disease. You name it, we got it, right? The top five: diabetes, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, hypertension, high blood. Did I say high blood pressure? Yeah, like all these things, arthritis. Basically, you name it, we got it, right? And so, realizing this as I got older, as I grew up, I knew that I had to do things differently. So I started with my relationship with food, right, and how I thought about it. Again, the original cycle of thinking when it comes to food is that you eat to get full, and if you're full, you know that you've gotten your nutrition, as opposed to then I switched that to eating for nutrition and not to get full, right? Not to get full. That's really, really important distinction, because what ends up happening beyond not necessarily choosing the best foods, and I'll get into that in just a second, but you also overeat. You end up overeating, right? So eat for nutrition. That was one of the primary and early changes that I made in my belief systems around food and my relationship with food. I eat for nutrition, and I don't eat to get full. Also, too, another thing to learn about eating to get full is that your brain, it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes for your brain to realize that you're actually full. So your brain isn't getting the signal that you're full for another 15 to 20 minutes, right? So if you eat to get full, by the time you feel full and you're still eating, you've gone way beyond, well, you've eaten way beyond what you've needed. So, like really remember that and be cognizant of that. You have to raise your level of awareness of eating to be full. Don't eat to be full. You'll feel full later, right? You'll feel full 15 to 20 minutes after you've stopped eating. And so that really, knowing this, eating for nutrition and knowing that you'll get full later, you'll reduce your portions, right? Here in the U.S., our portions are out of control. You go out to eat in a restaurant, they'll give you enough food for two people, and it's pretty, for me, surprising when I go out to eat. I always get surprised that a single person can finish that giant plate of food that the server just brought out. That portion control will go a long way. You'll start to condition yourself to eat less and less by understanding that you're eating for nutrition and that you're going to get full, that you'll feel full much later than you actually are, right? So it helps you condition to lower your portions, and ultimately, you're lowering your calorie intake, right? And I'm not talking about starvation diets or anything like that, but we live in a time in society where our calorie intake is too high. It's way too high. Right, our bodies are built still for hunter gathering times, and we're meant to go through periods of 0 calories. Again, I don't want you to starve yourself, but I also don't want you to overeat, right? Because overeating, and I'm not saying obesity is necessarily a disease or an illness or being overweight, but it's a symptom of underlying things, right? It can be a symptom for underlying things. And when you look at the statistics, it used to be like 20 years ago, the statistic here in the US was that, the population was 60% overweight or obese. Now it's like 70 to 75%, right? And again, you think about all the other underlying conditions that could be a symptom of. Right, so cut down the calories, and thinking about food, rewiring your relationship with food, and thinking about it as nutrition as opposed to being full, will really go a long way to helping you do that. Now, some other things I've done that I've changed when it comes to my relationship with food: I've cut carbs. I've stopped eating rice, not altogether, but I've reduced it drastically. Drastically reduced my intake on rice, drastically reduced my intake on carbs. And here's the thing about carbs. I think one of the misconceptions about carbs is that carbs is like rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, things like that. And yes, those are carbs, right? Like those starchy, heavy carbs. But carbs are also vegetable, right? So vegetables are good, right? I eat vegetables, but I did cut a lot of those heavy, starchy carbs out of my diet, especially grain products. I've cut grain completely out. It's one of those things that I've learned about myself, that once I cut it out, I felt a real tangible difference, not only in my physical health and my gut health, but I felt more clarity. I felt a little bit, well, yeah, I mean, just with anxiety, things like that. Just for me personally, like the cutting the grains. Grain products, bread, pasta, has really helped with me maintaining a high level of health. You can read all about it. Again, I'm not a professional, I'm not a scientist. There's a book that really solidified this principle for me of cutting grain products. It's called Grain Brain. I'll leave a link of that for that book in the show notes, in the description of this video. I encourage you to read that. If you even suspect that you have a gluten intolerance, read this book called Grain Brain. It'll open your mind to a lot of things, and it could make a big difference in your nutrition, and therefore in your health. So I've lowered carbs, I've cut grain products, I've cut dairy as well. I'm just the older I've gotten, and this might be just a me thing. The older I've gotten, the more dairy intolerant I've become. I read some research where really most of the population is dairy intolerant. You hit a certain age, which is like, it's a fairly young age too. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you hit a certain age where you just can't tolerate dairy because we don't need it anymore, right? We're not babies, right? So we stop producing. I think it's something like we stop producing the enzymes that digest and processes the dairy, and so I can't handle it. I've cut dairy for that reason, because I can't. My system can't handle it. That means milk, cream, ice cream. I still can handle cheese here and there, but not too much of it in certain types. But for the most part, I've cut dairy. I've cut dairy products. I've cut sugars for the most part, high sugars, fructose corn syrup, refined sugars, sugary drinks, things like that. Sugar just is bad news, man, bad news for your system. So cut that as much as you possibly can. And I know some of these things are going to be hard because your body will have developed, if you're drinking sugary drinks and, like your Starbucks once a day, coffee once a day with the sugary stuff, even like bread and stuff, your body processes it into sugars. Your body will go through a withdrawal process, when you cut this stuff down. So if you need to, maybe just kind of wean yourself off. I mean, if you wanna just cut cold turkey, you can do that as well. But it might be more tolerable if you just kind of slowly wean yourself off, because your body will have developed a dependence on these things. So yeah, refined sugars, high fructose corn syrups, things like that, sugary beverages I've cut. Um, I was never a fruit eater anyways. I don't eat a lot of fruit. I never did, so that was never an issue. But fruits are high in sugar. Fruit, only blossom, certain times of year. And so, from the evolutionary standpoint, fruits were only supposed to be available certain times of year. And so our bodies aren't used to having fruit all the time. Now, not say that fruits are bad for you, but it is a lot. It can be a lot of sugar if you're eating fruit all the time. All right. Okay. So as far as like my overall eating habit and eating plan, it is a low carb, high protein diet. I do eat vegetables, but I do eat a lot of protein, animal protein. I know it's arguable. Some people have different opinions and things on the types of proteins that you intake. But whatever proteins, you consume, protein is important. Protein is building blocks. And so if the older we get, the more protein we need. So it's important to keep that protein high, and I do eat a lot of protein, and I also carb cycle, right? I carb cycle, which means I go days where I don't have carbs in my diet. Generally, it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Those are 4 days that I don't have carbs. Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday are my carb days. Again, mostly vegetables. Occasionally, I'll eat rice. I'll have bread. Very, very rarely, I'll have bread, or I'll have a grain-free bread. Um, but it is a 1, 2, 4, and 6 are my protein only days, and 3, 5, and 7 are my carb days. So I carb cycle, so that way my body can process all the carbs. I think as modern society, we eat too much carbs, and so that's allowed me to just kind of stay healthy. I think for me personally, my experience is that I feel like when I eat too much carbs, there's a high level of inflammation. It creates a high level of inflammation in my body, and so I like the fact that I like how I feel on a carb cycle eating plan, right? When I limit the amount of carbs, limit the days even when I consume carbs. Now, this isn't absolute, you know what I mean? It's not like 100%, Spartan. It's not miserable. It's not so regimented that I don't enjoy myself, right? I drink beer, that's carbs, right? Right? I'll eat ice cream, although I've just found a Ben and Jerry's dairy-free ice cream, which is amazing, and I know there's got to be sugar in that. So I'm not saying don't live, enjoy yourself, but the primary thing for me when it comes to is food is nutrition, right? Food is nutrition. In modern society, food has become so much more than that. Like, I'm a foodie. I eat for the experience, and yeah, I think there's a degree that I do that as well. But the primary directive of eating for me is nutrition, and if I never override. I don't override that directive just on the basis of experience, right? Just on the basis of, I'm just going to stuff myself for no reason whatsoever. I'm going to indulge in this all the time, and that's just my lifestyle, right? If it really is all about lifestyle, and you give yourself the leeway of 80-20 rule, and like 80% your eating habits are a healthy lifestyle, and 20%, or maybe 20 seems high, 10 to 15, 10 to 15%, you allow yourself those little indulgences, and you allow yourself to have a good time and enjoy yourself. Oh, the last thing I do is I intermittent fast. I think this is a great way of keeping your system clean. There are other things about like ketones and getting into ketosis, getting your body into ketosis. I'm not going to really talk about. You can read up on that. Yeah, I intermittent fast. It's an 8-hour window basically that I eat in. So whatever that 8-hour window, if you want to intermittent fast for you, it really helps. It really helps. I think one of the biggest things in my observation of how people live here in the U.S. especially, is that we wake up from waking up to going to sleep, we're constantly consuming, right? We're constantly consuming. Right? You wake up, you eat, you have breakfast. I don't even have breakfast, right? It's usually hours before after waking up that I have my first solid food. So like you wake up, you eat, and you're eating until basically right before you go to bed. Right? I mean, like I've observed a lot of people living this way, and that's overconsumption, right? Your body needs to reset. Your body needs to not only reset, actually, your body needs to process all those things, all the things that you've consumed. And so if you limit your consumption window, your body will have more time to process and operate correctly, right? If it's in constant consumption mode, I don't know. I don't think to me that feels like your body will be just imbalanced, right? Right. So the 8 hour window will really help, and intermittent fasting has really been a tremendous help for me. Maintaining a high level of health. So those are the things, and I'm not going to repeat them because there's a lot to go back over. But it's really again re-examining or examining your relationship with food and how you eat and your habits around that. Well, re-examining your relationship with food so that you can rework your habits, right? So that you could create new habits if you need to around how you eat. Because again, how we eat and the foods we eat, the things that we intake, are foundational. They will largely determine the level of health that you have. And if you wanna improve your health, chances are there are some things that you can adjust in your eating habits. So that's gonna do it for this episode of Ronnie's Health Corner. It's a longer one than usual, but it's an important one. The food conversation is an important one. So make sure if you're not subscribed to this channel, if you're not subscribed to this playlist, go ahead and subscribe. There's more tips coming, more episodes coming. So yeah, we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Stay well, stay healthy, and yeah, see you in the next episode.